All right, your papers look good. I like your T-charts on the back. Those look real nice comparing Jacob and Esau. And we're going to continue on here. So if you remember, at the end of the last lesson, Rebekah has returned with Eliezer, and she and Jacob are married. They love one another, even though they've never met before. Okay. So chapter 25, we see quite a list of names in the beginning, okay, and a little bit of information. There's just a few things that we want to make sure we get here. So look at Genesis chapter 25, starting at verse 1. If you read your Bibles there. All right, so verse 1 says, Then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. She bare him Zimran and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. Okay, so Abraham takes another wife here, and he has 6 more children that we read of. Okay, probably had many daughters there as well. He lived another 30-some years after that. And then look at verse 5. That's important here. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines, which would be Keturah and Hagar, which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he lived eastward unto the east country. These are the days of Abraham's life which he lived, 160 years. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, Hittite, which is before Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. So we're going to stop there a second. Okay. We see some of those sons. There are 6 of them. Okay. But the Bible doesn't tell us much beyond that here. We know that they'll be spread out. Midian, the Midianites. Okay. We recognize that name. And so they'll be great countries. Again, God had promised to Abraham that his sons would become great nations. And not just Isaac, but others will as well. Okay. But what does Abraham do to these other 5 sons? Ishmael's already gone. Ishmael's gone with his mother Hagar, probably to Egypt. Colin?
He gives them riches and sends them away.
Okay, sends them away. That's important. Abraham, again, knows in his life that his son Isaac is a weak personality. He can be easily manipulated. He doesn't have the strength to maybe make a difficult or hard decision, or to tell someone no. And so, to care for and preserve his son Isaac, Abraham gives gifts to all of his sons, not just Isaac. Now, he is the chosen. He is the firstborn of promise from Abraham and Sarah, the only child. But anyways, Abraham does give gifts to his other sons and sends them away, so that they have gifts as well. But we need to see that the main gift, obviously, here is for Isaac. Okay? Is the most important ones. And then when he's finally, how old? What age does Abraham die at? Micah.
175.
Dies at 175 years old. And where is he buried? Brody.
Machpelah.
Buried in the cave of Machpelah, along with, who else is buried there? Jen?
Sarah.
His wife, Sarah, who he had bought the cave of Machpelah. All right, let's continue on here, verse 11. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lehorai. Now these are the generations of Ishmael. Again, we have a whole bunch of sons listed here. We're going to pick it up in verse 19. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padanaram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, And Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And the children struggled together within her. And she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and the 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Okay? We know, in the timelines, okay, obviously Isaac didn't marry Rebekah and instantly Abraham died. Abraham was alive for 20-some more years. So for the first 20 or so years of the life of Isaac and Rebekah, they obviously had no children, because this child is born, or these children, Jacob and Esau, are born after Abraham has died. That's a long time for them to have no children. Maybe, in fact, they were probably thinking, and their father Abraham probably had to tell them, patience, Isaac and Rebekah, patience. You have to wait on the Lord. I had to wait till I was 100 before I could have children. Well, obviously, if Isaac was 40, we know approximately 20 years later, he has Jacob, so he's 60. He himself is old, but he has a perfect example in his father to set the stage and to make sure. He tells him, be patient, wait on the Lord. The child that you will have is a child of God, not your own. And that's what is probably the main lesson that Isaac and Rebekah can take here. This child that's born to them is born to them of God. It's not something that, well, at their own whim or whenever they want something, they can have a child, but they have to wait 20-some years before God blesses and opens the womb of Rebekah so that she can have children. Maybe the same for us too. Some of you, when you get older, you get married and you say, now we look forward to having our own children. Some couples, God makes them wait a long time and they have to be patient, and they only have 1, maybe 2, just a few, whereas others have many. It's all up to the Lord. He controls the womb of the mother. So they had to learn that. They had to learn that this child would come from God and was not something that they could determine when they wanted. Okay? Now, what do we see there? We see that Rebekah, she notices, now she's never had children, but she can probably talk to the other women, and it seems like she can feel lots of movement in her belly. What she would probably say, more so than other women. And so she entreats the Lord. She prays to God. What's going on? What's happening here in my belly? What does God tell her? Colin?
There are 2 nations in her womb. So.
2 nations. 2 nations are growing in your womb. Twins. You'll have twins. That in and of itself is amazing. Okay? She will have twins. 2 nations are in thy womb. And God already tells her a few things. Tells that one will be stronger and one will be weaker, but the elder will serve the younger. Okay? The older one will be servant to the younger one. A little bit different than a typical. Let's see what happens after these children are born. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So the one, Jacob, was holding on to his brother's leg as though, no, I don't want you to be first. I want to come from the mother's womb first. That wasn't the case. Esau still came out first. Jacob was holding on to his heel as though he wanted to be. And then we don't read other much than Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So 60 years old. The boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. A little bit there. What evidence is there from the text that this isn't going to be a very harmonious family? They aren't going to be getting along. What are some problems that we see just in those few verses that we read there? Amber?
Isaac has Esau and loves Jacob.
Right, it's as though they picked favorites. Favorites in the household. Favorites will never be good. Okay? And it's very obvious here. They're probably pretty forthcoming in that. Father loves Esau. Mother loves Jacob. They each have their different personalities. And that's exactly what we need. God says the people in the church have different personalities, so that each can play a different part and role. We don't want everyone to be the same. We need people to be different. And so here you have Esau, who's an outdoorsman. He's an avid hunter, strong, hairy all over, red. He enjoys hunting and being outdoors. And then we have Jacob. He enjoys being indoors. He enjoys working in the tent with mother. Okay? He's not going to be as strong and robust. Maybe his skin is probably paler. He's not obviously hairy, but smooth skin, unlike his brother. Okay? We might even, well, in today's day and age, or we might describe him, well, he's a wimp. He's a bit of a sissy. He doesn't do anything. He just sits around all day. He's not very strong. He should get out and do something. Get outdoors. Instead, he sits around all day. And that's the difference here between Jacob and Esau. But there's another one, and I asked you to read, okay, Romans chapter 9. And the verses there say, "For the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. And it was said unto her, The elder shall serve the younger, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated." God was teaching Mother Rebekah, when he spoke to her, about election and reprobation. What is election all about? Election has to do with what? Election in the Bible? Megan? Okay, election has to do with God's people, the chosen, the righteous. They are elected of God. And what about reprobation? What is reprobation speaking about? Logan?
The ones God rejected.
Alright, they are those whom God has rejected. He said, they are not mine. God is teaching Rebekah that. How difficult that must have been for her to raise 2 children in the household. And here is one child that she knows is loved of God, Jacob. And here's another child that is hated of God, will not be a child of God, Esau. Difficult task for a mother. And yet she raises both faithfully. Okay? And Rebekah knows this, even before they're born. And now that they are born, we see that coming through. Rebekah probably paying attention to what is good and what is right, and spending lots of time with Jacob, teaching and instructing him, whereas weak Isaac probably enjoys being outdoors more with that son, although he is reprobate. Right? And again, you can't have very much harmony in a home where you have both elect and reprobate living together, those who love the Lord and hate the Lord. Alright, and finally we get to the idea of the birthright. Who does the birthright typically go to in the Bible times? Kenton?
Oldest one?
Would go to the oldest son. The other sons maybe have to find their own way. They may get some of their father's possessions, but not the main possession, which is the land. The land in which father lives. What land does Isaac live in? Kimberly, what land does Isaac live in? Well, you don't have to look at, we're talking in general. So you're trying to find specific. Where does he live? What's the promised land? Canaan. He lives in Canaan. Specifically by the Horai, which, do you remember where that name came up previously? Remember who named it that? Brody?
Hagar?
Yeah, Hagar did. Okay? Hagar had named it there. Thou God seest me. That type. Because God had seen her there and heard her there and provided that water for her. But anyways, he's in the land of Canaan. That means that the birthright, according to the birthright, the land, the promise of the land of Canaan would go on to Esau. But that's not the case here because God has already said, the elder shall serve the younger. I will give the birthright to the younger, to Jacob. The promise of the land of Canaan, which is a picture of what? What is the promise of the land of Canaan a picture of? Brody?
Heaven?
It's a picture of heaven. A gift of God that we all want. We want to be in heaven with God. So that's the idea of the birthright. So let's continue, now that we have that in our minds, and see what happens with that birthright. Verse 29. And Jacob sod pottage, which means he made a fine, sweet-smelling, probably good-tasting pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. Let us not think that Jacob wasn't thinking ahead here. More than likely, he said, I would like to have that birthright. He wanted it. His mother had probably told him some stories, but he was probably still afraid because he saw how his father loved Esau, and it was father who would give the blessing. And so Jacob begins to fear that even though he has been told by mother and by God that he would have the birthright, he's a little bit worried that father may still give it to Esau. And so Jacob begins to take matters into his own hands. We see this over and over. We're going to see this pattern over and over in Jacob's life. He thinks it needs to be done his way. He can't trust in God. He wants to control things. And so what does he do? He whips up some really good soup. He knows when his brother goes out that he comes back hungry every time, and probably is banging on, well, in today's age, he'd be opening the fridge and the freezer and banging the doors on the cupboards and finding pots and pans. What is there to eat, mother? I want something good, something that will fill me up. I've been out in the field all day and I'm hungry. Well, Jacob knows his brother, and he thinks, now I shall fix him maybe a soup that he really loves that mother makes, and I'll make it really spicy, and I'll throw in some good flavors, and I'll make it in a way in which he really loves it. And I'll make sure that the windows are open and the smell goes out so that as my brother Esau comes home, he will smell that smell wafting, and he'll want this pottage. And Esau came from the field, and he was faint. Shows he's tired, he's weak. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die. And what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, so bean soup. And he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Jacob's no fool. Here he had provided a delicious, enticing meal that his brother would want to have. And he tricks him. He says, well, for this, how about I'll give you a bowl of this pottage, you trade me your birthright. Well, at this point, Esau can care less about it. He just wants food. But on top of that, he shows his ungodly nature, because he says here, when he says, I'm about to die, that's not the point. The point is, Esau knows, well, when I die at the end of this life, I have nothing anyways. Just like we've been reading in Ecclesiastes and devotion, Solomon says over and over, all is vanity. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. All is vanity. It's worthless when I die anyways. What are all these possessions going to do for me? Go ahead, have the birthright, take it. It's not that important to me anyways. I just want food. Now in his heart, maybe thinks, Father won't listen to it, or maybe he thinks Father's so rich that it doesn't matter if he has a birthright, I'll be wealthy anyways. But that's not the point. The point is that Jacob is trying to do the work of God here. Jacob should have trusted in God. He should have waited for God to give him the birthright, but he doesn't. He goes ahead and he begins to act this way. And then we see at the end what Jacob did. 4 things. He ate and drank, he rose up, he went his way, and he despised his birthright. He hated it. In Hebrews later on, he's called a profane person. Profane person, the ungodly, those who use God's name in vain, but also hate God and hate the truth and hate what God loves. And that's exactly how Esau is behaving here. Okay? And Jacob thinks he needs to do it his way instead of God's way. So not a family of love, doesn't look like. Looks like a family of trickery. And we'll see that as it continues on into our next lessons. Just not a family that gets along. The family of Jacob as when Jacob as a child. Later on, the family of Jacob as a father and husband doesn't go well either. Jacob's family life is not a great family life at all. But you see here at the beginning that lots of trouble in their lives.